In his 1967 hit, Life is a Dream, the British singer-turned-actor Noel Harrison sang, "Seems like the way I feel about myself is shifting like ice on a stream. Nothing means much to me. Life is a dream." Sounds familiar? Yeah, to me too. It may be a product of a relationship breakup that the heart becomes hardened, calloused over and resistant to any further interference, even from the most beautiful strangers. And indeed, as one proceeds through life and heartache inevitably piles on heartache, one's appetite for further punishment is naturally diminished. But there's more to it than that. Ennui and an awareness of the meaninglessness of life have always been present for me. These things have merely become more pronounced as time has gone on. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. It's just a thing, something that you cannot ascribe value to, like the mountains or the sea. According to psychologists, though, people's awareness of the meaninglessness of life and their subsequent boredom or ennui represents a meaning threat which forces them to respond in some way, either positively or self-destructively. You see, human beings are the only animal out there that are aware of their own mortality. Put simply, we are born, and pretty quickly we learn that we are going to die, that our tenure here is not infinite. Your cat doesn't know that, and neither does your dog. Which means that us humans are placed in a very strange quandary. We find ourselves compelled to search for some kind of meaning, because without that, we would surely descend into inactivity and depression and probably madness. Now, at this point, you might well be champing at the bit to volunteer what makes life meaningful in your view, and doubtless there are many things. Love of others, children, family, and nature being just a few. But when you consider that our perception of those things is predicated entirely on our being alive in the first place, then you hit a logical bumper. Because while those things give us deep satisfaction while we are alive, they do not in themselves necessarily signify a greater overarching meaning for life itself. You can say that your children are your legacy and that you live on through them, but then, of course, one day your children will die, and their children will, and so on. And on a longer timeline, the entire planet and all of humanity will one day be wiped out, leaving no trace at all that we've ever existed. So, unless you are religious and believe in an afterlife of some kind, which feels like a fairly risky bet to me, then you will, at some point, have to grapple with this uniquely human problem of wondering what the hell you're actually doing here on this planet for this relatively short and crazy ride. In a recent article for Psychology Today entitled "How Do People Escape the Boredom of Meaninglessness?", Arash Amendaza states that, broadly speaking, people go one of two ways. They either pursue what they perceive as more meaningful activities, like helping others, creating something of value, or even simply conforming to the particular ideology or tribe within society, or they seek escape. Here's a quote. However, this approach to overcoming boredom, seeking greater meaning, is more difficult for people with low self-esteem or weak, incoherent worldviews. For them, an easier strategy is escape, meaning reduced self-awareness. These escape strategies include engaging in certain basic behaviours that are hedonic, or i.e. pleasurable, or involve mindless social interactions. Some examples are sexual activity, eating, drinking, playing video games, and interacting online anonymously. Which sounds like a massive value judgment to me. To describe someone who decides that hedonism, having a good time, is the best course of action in the face of a world that lacks meta-meaning, as being weak or incoherent, seems not a little patronising. What if the person's worldview is extremely coherent? What if in his view life is random and that therefore satiating his desires with sensual pleasures is actually the most logical course of action? Because there are many who think this way, even if they don't articulate it quite how I just have. At this point, you might counter that hedonism doesn't bring lasting happiness, which may or may not be true, but then neither does anything else. Because happiness is not a plateau onto which you can step, lay down and relax forever. Happiness is fleeting, whatever course of action you choose, and you must enjoy it while you can. For myself, though, I tend to overcome my sense of life's meaninglessness and my impending demise with a combination of the two different approaches. Yes, I have dedicated much of my life to hedonism and to the enjoyment of sensual pleasures. Well, as someone with an addictive personality, I am naturally always drawn to what appears to be the easier, softer way, even if it doesn't turn out like that. But I also like to engage in what I consider to be more meaningful tasks, such as creating value with my writing and these videos, plus helping others around me and so on. The former, by the way, has recently been named dark flow. You are perhaps aware of the concept of flow state, when an individual is so engrossed in what he is doing that he doesn't even notice the time passing. Well, dark flow is the same, except when there's a more problematic, addictive activity involved, such as gambling, drinking, drug taking, or promiscuous sex. I, of course, have long been a connoisseur of dark flow and have even promoted it through my writings and online content. But even I am not stupid enough to think that dark flow alone is enough to keep the demons away. From bitter experience, I know that when you wake up at 11 a.m. with a terrible hangover and a piercing headache, that your existential crisis will be a lot worse than last night. And actually, as much as an old libertine like me hates to admit it, doing useful work is usually more satisfying. I've always felt better after having completed a successful piece of writing than I have after a drunken night or a pointless one-night stand. But once again, when you zoom out and recognise that all of your good deeds and meaningful work will soon be forgotten, it rather begs the question, is the meaningful route actually any better than the meaningless one? This type of thinking is not new to me, by the way. I've felt the same way for many years, since I was a child, in fact. But just recently, I've sensed a more pronounced disconnection from my emotions, perhaps simply because I've been around the same old merry-go-round of relationships and eventual, inevitable breakups too many times. At some point, your energy starts to go. More to the point, the novelty wears off as you finally realise that while there may be a new face and a new body in front of you, the process and the timeline is always pretty much identical. And before you say, but that's just you, Troy, you need to do X, Y, or Z and change in some way and then you'll see a different outcome, just recall the divorce rate around much of the developed world, as well as the plethora of unhappy relationships we see in our daily lives out there. Everyone trying to scratch that same itch. Everyone trying to shut that small voice in their head up and failing and descending once more into a quagmire of disappointment and regret. But having said all of that, I don't think my position on this stuff is bad. On the contrary, there's something strangely liberating about being released from the desires that shackle so many. To see reduced significance in those facts of lives that have trapped so many in unhappy existences. If there is no point, then why do anything at all, you might ask? To which my answer has always been, well, I'm here now. I might as well squeeze every drop of satisfaction and pleasure out while I can. And as Albert Camus argued, an awareness of the absurdity of life should not prevent one from living. On the contrary, one should charge with greater vigour and strength into that absurdity simply because one is alive and able to do so. If you'd like to support me and my work, then you can support me on Patreon for just $5 a month. The link is below. You'll get an exclusive video like this once a week, plus you can ask me questions for future videos. If you'd like a free call with me to discuss your own particular dating situation, then hit the link in the description below. You can also check out my bundle of 11 books about dating, sex, and the dating marketplace called Renegade Dating Blueprint. Again, the link is in the description below. See you next time.